Yo, what's up, Chris? How's it going, man?
Good, Jack. Yeah, it's going pretty good. I decided to try this outside, if that's okay. It's such a pleasant day. I don't really feel like being in my studio.
It looks nice.
Yeah, it's great. This is our little house on Vashon Island, and we've got a
Holy
view of the
crap.
water. And I'm in the back of the garden, just kind of chilling like Bob Dylan.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Pretty sweet
that's
setup.
gonna be most of the quarantine here because it's just so kind of mellow and peaceful and relaxing as
Yeah,
opposed to the town, which is kind of intense.
I'm sure. Have you been working on anything? Like, are you doing anything to keep busy?
Well, I stacked wood today in the we had to we had to have a tree get cut down, and so I had to like stack all the wood, and so I stacked wood all morning basically. But I'm not really doing very much musically as that's goal oriented. I'm playing music every day, but I'm just kind of
Yeah.
just playing for the fun of playing. I made 3 records right before this thing started, so
Really?
uh, yeah, I'm kind of I think I'm kind of done. Right, at least writing songs for children. I have 2 more records of the 3 I made have not come out yet, so there's more music coming. But so I'm kind of taking a break from being music guy, and I'm doing visual art actually, which is
Wow.
really fun and relaxing, and it's actually what I went to college for. And I didn't know what I was doing in college. I didn't have a voice as an artist, and now I've kind of found one, and so I'm doing that as my creative thing, which it might be the beginning of a new chapter. It might just be a temp. It's been something that's kind of been percolating for the last 5 or 6 years. So,
That's interesting. So, in college, you didn't really know like what your plan was going in?
well, yeah, I actually, I was super into music, of course, but I knew I didn't want to go to music school.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of I just instinctively knew I wanted to synthesize my own thing, not kind of, I don't know, maybe it's kind of childish or whatever, but I didn't want to learn all the secrets. I didn't want to know that the next chord after a C minor seventh should be a D minor augmented or whatever. I wanted to find it. So I went to art school. I went to visual arts school, and yes, but I did all these kind of wavy, wonky shapes, but they had no context. They had no story. They had no narrative to them or anything. I just didn't know what they were, and I gave up on it. And then, like 6 or 7 years ago, I found this Inuit printmaker named Knojivak Ashivak, and her work just like blew my mind because it was what I was trying to do, or not even trying to do, but it tapped the same kind of thing that I was trying to tap without knowing what I was doing back in college. So it
Oh,
sort of like all of a sudden I found a voice, I found a perspective, something to say, and started applying even the same style that I did in college to a new kind of body of work, and had a show of that stuff, and then I went dormant for a couple of years, and now I'm all of a sudden like I'm back making art. I never know what I'm going to be doing as far as music or art. It's really just like dictated by impulse, you
yeah.
know? Like my impulse right now is to not write songs and draw. So that's what I'm doing.
Was it always that way? Like even with like the presidents, was it kind of just like more of inspiration in that sense, as opposed to we have to get a record out now? Like we got to
Yeah,
find inspiration.
the beginning part was definitely pure inspiration. Just pure writing and performing songs that made us laugh, made the crowd laugh. Being absurd, being a really tight little band, and the thrill of that. That was all generated by just intuition and pure selfish creativity. We just wanted to see this thing happen.
Wow.
And to me, the Presidents was just another in a long series of bands that I'd been in. It was just, oh, here's another group of people I'll play with for 6 months to 2 years, and then it'll be over. But it clicked, and it wasn't ever, didn't fizzle out the way every other band I was in did. But yeah, that back then it was all. And then once you get signed, and there's expectations, and you've tasted the magic Kool-Aid or whatever of fame, then the pressure is put on, and the pressure to repeat, not necessarily to evolve, but to repeat,
Yeah.
is put on, and that was a bitter fruit that didn't agree with us.
So that's like kind of a common answer that I get from like a lot of musicians that I know, whether it doesn't matter at what level. It's like it seems like the music industry is either you're like all in, or there's like a lot of like, I don't want to say like blackmail. I don't, because I'm not in that world. I'm more of like a journalist than I am a musician. But like I feel like there's a lot of negativity and bitterness in the music industry when it comes to record labels.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing is they pretend to want to take care of you
Yeah.
and nurture your talent and shepherd you along as you grow as an artist and become a professional, but they really don't. They just want to squeeze the money out of you.
Yeah.
And so the disconnect between their messaging and their actions, like, we got sent to Germany 5 times in our the year that we got signed, and played smaller and smaller clubs in Germany, and we were like, what are we doing? Why are we uprooting ourselves from these US tours, which are building and building and building, and going to Germany to get smaller, breaking us in Germany. Had lunch. I had lunch with her, and she had a couple glasses of wine. And I finally said, like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this to us?" And she was relaxed enough to admit that she was afraid of losing her job. Her job was to break us in Germany, and it wasn't working. But she just plowed forward with it anyways because she was afraid. And so that was like where all of a sudden the blinders were off, and I was like, oh, okay, now I can see everybody's like
Yeah.
story, and
Oh my
how their personal kind of arc is intersecting with ours, and how we really have to take care of ourselves. So, it was a educational experience. Let's put it that way. I don't really have anything against those people.
God.
They were only doing what they were only, operating within the boundaries of their capabilities, but it was not a like nurturing environment.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, well, thanks so much for taking time out of your day. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. Again, for us, I'm a senior at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix,
Mhm.
and we're shooting a film. Me and a few of my buddies from Kirkland, Washington. If that's like,
Yep, I
see,
know
I'm
that.
from New Jersey, so like I have no idea. But we're making a film about the entire Seattle music scene, dating obviously back from the early '90s during the whole grunge scene and all of that,
Yeah.
all the way up until now, kind of like the evolution of everything.
Hmm.
So I wanted to reach out and kind of ask you a couple of questions. Like this will probably take no more than 15, 20 minutes of your time, if that's cool. I don't
Oh,
want this to be
well,
like
I thought we were already doing it. Okay,
yeah,
you know what? I'm
well,
gonna switch. I'm gonna switch to this other chair because the dappled light is screwing up my eyeballs. Hold
oh,
on,
good,
I
man.
gotta find some non-dapple. Ah, there we go.
It all looks beautiful, man. It has
Okay,
great
I,
sun.
li- I like the non-dapple. I find myself a bit squinty in the dapple. There you go. Target.
It's
Bullseye.
perfect. Bullseye, man. It's
All right,
perfect.
there we go.
So I think like the first thing I kind of wanted to ask you, uh, growing up in Seattle, still Seattle based, what was your whole like what inspired you growing up in that area, wanting to become a musician? I mean, everybody talks about as a young child, especially those who end up in alternate rock bands, growing up listening to the Beatles and Zeppelin and things of that nature. What inspired you as a Seattle-based musician to get into music?
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. Now I have to move again because moving over there made the internet not work. So
Uh,
now I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try. The thing is, I should go in the living room, but my wife is in there. Oh, wait a minute. I have an idea. Okay. I'm back in the original spot, but clear of the dapple. All
It's all
right.
good, man. It's a
There we
beautiful
go.
setup.
Okay,
Uh,
you better ask that again because you went into like digital stormtrooper mode there. I didn't
awesome.
hear the question. All right, go.
All
In
right.
in five, four, three, two, one. Click.
Take two. So growing up in Seattle, Seattle-based musician. I know all the rock and alternative guys, or all the guys who end up in rock and alternative bands, grow up. You're inspired by the Beatles and Zeppelin, things of bands of that nature. For you, what was the biggest inspiration to pick up an instrument and start playing music at a young age?
Wow, that's actually well. I started when I was about four, playing piano, taking actual piano lessons. I was kind of being groomed between 4 and 10 ish to be a concert pianist,
Wow.
and went along that line. And then I finally picked up a guitar at one point, and was like, "Oh, this is so much better. I'll just do this." But the Beatles were, massive. I
Yeah.
got Sergeant Pepper's when it came out in 1967, when I was two and a half, and that album just set off like movies in my head. The visual aspect of that album really is what made me want to write songs. I wanted to also give people a visual, So that album and having it at that super young age when my imagination can be so real and vivid. More than it was the Beatles, I wasn't like necessarily into like it's the Beatles, like I didn't understand what the Beatles were. I just knew that album made me travel.
Yeah.
So really, it was like trying. I've been my whole life. I've been trying to rewrite Sergeant Pepper's, basically, but
Now,
not from a like hero worship stance, but more from a like creative. I love that aspect of songs. The songs that make you see things.
yeah. So what was rock kind of like your I don't want to say like motive, like your top genre when you broke into the business, or like even in high school bands? Like what was your bread and butter, I guess, when it came to creating music?
Well, not really rock necessarily. No, I was into I was into the Beatles. I was into that and that means like the full spectrum of their songwriting, like the ballads to the weird stuff, psychedelic to poppy, like I love the mixed bag. I've never been into like one genre. I've always been into songs, and I don't really care what songs are first. I don't care what genre they are, just so long as they're a great song. I like Christine 16 by Kiss, but I
Mm,
also like Mendelssohn and Bach and Vivaldi, and I don't like Beethoven that much, but so I'm into like classical and pop, and so it's all over the map. That was actually one of the things that was a problem with being in a rock band is I felt like I was painting with primary colors, yellow, drums, guitar, bass, vocal, um, and I really wanted to paint with every color, in the paint box. So yeah, I was into everything basically,
so
everything.
when you were in high school, like some of your high school bands before the presidents of the United States of America, were those completely different sounds to what that ended up being with the presidents?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm by a Japanese pop band, and I've I could go, was it jangly and angular? Jangular,
Yeah.
and it's sort of form basis for creating. It was the weirdest band. I was on the floor playing a tiny keyboard with half of a headphone, playing that for drums. I was singing into it for vocals, playing the keyboard, lying on the ground. And then there was a Hawaiian guy playing guitar and a long-haired, like absolute, sick bass player. We never played a show. Anyway, it went from that. That's I just described that as an indication of every band I was in was sort of like super cabaret, weird, broke down, funky, screwed up, you know, bizarre, arty. I used to once. Sometimes I played with like a cabra on my head with all the lights in the club off. So it was just like little on my head. was the only light show. It was nuts.
So what inspires you to kind of, and obviously the more you grow, the more you evolve. But what kind of inspires you to kind of switch up your craft, especially when you go from an alternative rock band that you're known for with the Presidents to Casper Babypants, where you're writing music for little kids?
Well, that actually is the whole. First of all, let me say, I'm sure you'll edit this, so I'm going to ask you: am I cutting in and out? Are you getting a clear
I mean, it's cutting in and out a
picture of
little
me,
bit,
or
but
is
like
it?
we're getting clear
Yeah.
audio. Just
You know
need
what? I think which is what you need. Okay,
right.
hold on. My wife is probably watching TV, and I'm going to tell her to stop. Katie, I gotta have the full internet if I'm going to be out there. Sorry, I'm getting very like stormtrooper stretched out. Okay, it won't be long, bud. Okay. All right. We are on this island, and our internet connection is sort of connected to a bunch of other houses, and sometimes, in middle of the day,
Oh yeah,
it
I'm out in
gets
the
a
middle
little
of nowhere too. It could
wonky.
be as just me as it is you, so I'll take some credit for that. But the question I
Oh, okay.
have,
But you're getting good audio, right? So
oh yeah,
that's all you.
we're good.
Okay.
We might cut
Okay.
out every now
Cool.
and then, but I think we're good to go. So the next thing I kind of wanted to ask you was, uh, what kind of inspires you as a musician to kind of switch up your taste, switch up your genres when like because when you're known for obviously with the president of the United States of America, alternative rock, you go from that to writing music for little kids with Casper Babypants. Like what's kind of like the inspiration behind that? I know you talked a little bit when we first jumped on about kind of letting it come to you in a sense and not kind of forcing it, but like what inspired you to kind of change up to what you're doing right now with music?
I've definitely have always been inspired by just figuring out what my actual voice is, if that makes sense. Like, what kind of music can I make that is absolutely transparent as far as how it represents me, like who I really am. Like I always shied away from the idea of like putting on a character or an artifice to go on stage or like um, and I guess in the end that drive, that focus on figuring that out made it so that when the presidents were happening, I definitely had this interior kind of messaging coming at me like, this isn't it. This isn't your final stop. There's something else you're supposed to do. And I didn't know what it was. And it took like 15 years of pecking around on the side. And, eventually all that experimenting outside the presidents got smaller and smaller and more innocent and more acoustic and more kind of less snarky and more kind of, I don't know, silly and eventually I realized, oh, it's kids music. I'm supposed to be singing. I'm supposed to take away like the presidents had this innocent core, but it also had all the innuendo around the outside. Like, am I really singing about a kitty and peaches? And what is lump really about? It all kind of might sound a little like there's a level of innuendo in it that makes it work. It's innocence and innuendo freaking between the two. But I was never that super comfortable with the innuendo part. There was a phase of my life where things went that direction creatively, but then it wasn't something I wanted to repeat and do over. So eventually, I got rid of the innuendo, and then innocent core that was also in the presidents was all that I was working with. So it was great. I got rid of the loud drums, the loud guitar, the ear splitting noise that we were making toward the end there, and went small. So it form of music that absolutely expressed who I really am. And who I really am is a very childlike person. I like to see the world as if I'm a beginner, a child. And I like to experience it that way. And so it's that I love. And I don't really feel like I'm making it for kids. I'm actually the very first parents musician. There's no genre called parents music, but if there was, I'd be the first to sign up.
So is it a more of a not easier process, but a more fun process for you? Because with Casper Babypants, you're putting out like an album a year, if not more. You have 17 albums out right
Yeah,
now.
well, a lot of that is, yeah, I have 17 out now, and I have two more full-length albums done and ready to go. The shutdown's over, and I can do
Yeah.
shows again. But um, it's harder, actually. It's harder because it's just me, and believe it or not, like, writing songs for little kids is harder than writing for grown-ups. I mean, in a grown-up band, you could turn up the distortion and read a phone book into a distorted mic if you did it with enough passion, and everyone would think you're super important. With this music for kids, the vocals are right up front. I've got to tell a story, even in the most simple song. There's got to be a little tension or a little arc or visual something. So it's not just being repetitive and goofy. I look at it as a real challenge to make something that's like my experience with Sergeant Pepper's when I was a tiny 2.5-year-old. I want them to latch on to music the way I latched onto that album. I want them to hear the music and see the story. So I have to write this. It's a lot more like cohesive, you know. Like
Yeah.
I could get away in the Presidents with a lot of like abstract poetry, but I can't get away with abstract poetry here.
Interesting. So growing up in Seattle, there's obviously the big early 90s scene in general with music as opposed to rock, obviously, with the Soundgardens and the Nirvanas, obviously. How big was that at the time? Because I was not alive then. 1991, Nevermind comes out, 92, 93, Pearl Jam makes it big. What's that whole atmosphere like for you as a musician in kind of like that scene in the early 90s in Seattle?
Uh, well, I was actually in Boston until when did I come back? I think I flip flopped between Seattle and Boston in 91, 92 in the scene in the early 90s. I was more connected to the Boston scene. And so I was really enmeshed in the Boston scene. I'd come back to Seattle in the winter to work and hang out with my friends or whatever. But I kind of missed that. But I remember cranking Nevermind in Boston a lot and loving it. And once I came back and decided to put roots down in like 93, things were pretty well established in that world. I didn't really go out and see that music very much. I didn't know those guys yet, you know, the people in those bands. But the beautiful thing about that grunge explosion was that in the aftermath, a band like the Presidents could play on a Tuesday at the Crocodile and the place would be packed because everybody was excited to see the next
Right.
Nirvana, you know? And so it was incredibly fertile ground to plant our seeds in or whatever, grow our flowers in. And so we couldn't have done it without the initial grunge explosion because it not only gave us something to kind of react against, not against, but you know, react to, um, and be influenced. I wanted to add like you know my own ridiculous lyrical kind of direction. Um, so we're not only influenced by excuse me by them, but intensity in the scene that really benefited us because we had built-in audiences from the beginning, just because everyone was curious.
So was there a few shows here and there where like they were just jam packed because everybody just expected greatness out of that scene?
Oh yeah, they all were. I said, like you could every night, every club was jam-packed
Wow.
because everybody wanted to see the next big thing. So it was an incredible. I mean, wow. I I almost feel like it's unfair. like that we got signed in a because of an un like I don't know, like the atmosphere was so supercharged that it did some of the work for us, you know.
Yeah. Wow. So how big of a deal was it when, because that whole, I again wasn't there. You were around it. You said you were in Boston for periods of that. What's the whole thing surrounding the whole Seattle grunge scene where everything kind of seemed very dark and gloomy in the sense like music was great, but at the same time, and I'm talking about those specific bands like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, it was just dark. It seemed like what do you think's the reasoning behind that? Like just the whole attitude of those bands in a sense.
Well, this is traditionally a heavy kind of dark atmosphere as winters are long.
Yeah.
Summer, which is right now, is beautiful but short, and relatively cool. And there's a lot of rainy, gray, heavy days where all you really can do is get together with your friends in the basement and play music. And I think that rainy, gray, heavy, pressury atmosphere sort of seeped into those basements and influenced that vibe, along with the fact that a lot of these musicians were influenced by heavy rock, Led Zeppelin, um, that kind of just like, what are they called? Why am I blanking on it? Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh,
What's his
Sabbath. Yeah,
Sabbath? Black Sabbath, sure.
I got you.
Um, and so the combination of like growing up with that music and then this atmosphere we lived in just kind of like solidified that vibe. And the lead singers in Soundgarden and Nirvana at least were troubled people,
Right.
who had rough childhoods, times, rough times being at ease in their own selves, and so that seeped in too. So it's like I don't think that's as true for Pearl Jam, but they're Pearl Jam is kind of like the Clash, and Nirvana is like the Sex Pistols. Like the Pearl Jam, I think wanted to like build camaraderie and build a scene and include and like create a loving environment, right? And Nirvana wanted to just like smash the world. And it's the same for like the Clash. Kind of wanted to like offer other perspectives, reggae and the Sandinistas and all that stuff, and be political. And the Sex Pistols just wanted to spit on everything and break stuff. So
Right.
you got to kind of have the two. But anyway, I mean that's like my super intuitive, maybe not very well educated guess as to why the music was heavy. Lead singer personality, rain, and influence.
Yeah. For you guys with the President of the United States of America, what was your main message to your fans when creating your music?
Uh, Join us. Like, come join the band. And, like, you're in the band too. That was, I think, what in a very like old fashioned punk rock sense. It's like a do it yourself. I came from busking and playing on the street, and I did that because I didn't feel like I should have to wait around for even the thumbs up from the man to have a show. Like I was like, I'm gonna wake up on a Wednesday morning and be like, okay, I'm gonna do a gig today and just go play. So I would hope that the message was like, you're included. Welcome in. Come on in. We need you as much as you need us, kind of thing.
So I'm always interested or intrigued, I
Yeah.
guess, in
And
a
don't.
sense, to like when you're like at your peak, and you mentioned like those early days in Seattle, you kind of had like the crowds built for you in a sense because they're expecting the next big thing. What's it like playing in front of 600, 700 people in that kind of atmosphere where everybody's just expecting greatness?
Well, that part never. I think I kind of figured out that was what was going on later. At the time, I didn't really. I was so focused on just the joy of playing and the joy of writing songs and jumping around and the smiling faces in the audience that I didn't feel pressure. So it was like it was just like something to do. Like we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media or so many like ways to watch television. We had to watch what was on television. And if what was on television was not good, we had to do something else. And a lot of times that was jam, play music, something to do. So the excitement and the release of playing the shows and what it was like was just sort of I don't know. It was like necessary to be happy. So I didn't really put a lot of pressure. I never thought we'd get signed. I mean, I never formed the band to get on a major label. It was all about just like um, it changed, of course, when we ended up standing up in front of 7,000 people,
Yeah.
and then you could feel the pressure. But when it was being newly minted, it was nothing but just like relaxed joy.
Right. And when you guys get signed, that whole experience for you, because you said like that was not like your plan or like in your plans at least. What was that whole story like when you're playing and then you run into a record deal like you did?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, it was so like I said, I'd grown up DIY doing it myself, and the band, The Presidents, was just another in a long series of DIY projects. Um, so I was skeptical, very skeptical, but also really fell for the line I was being given, which is you are an important songwriter and you are elevating joy in this dark age and, keeping people smiling and we need more of your music. And so I kind of fell for that a little bit. But also, I just had this very strong gut feeling like this is untenable, it's unsafe, it's not repeatable. Eyes closed, and everyone's like, "Monkey, monkey, paint more paintings." I'm like, "I can't. I don't know what I did." So, so yeah, it was disorienting, and but then I found a way to, I was like, oh, I'm going to take the opportunity. So I found a way to be compartmentalize the voice inside that was saying, "Get out." And so eventually I quit, and we were broken up for 5 years, and then we got back together, and that was glorious because there was no pressure on us then,
Right.
and I always think of that second act as us being the world's best President's cover band because there was so little pressure that it just was like, oh, we get to play these songs? Wow, hee, this is great. So yeah, I'm really glad we got that second act, and that second act went on for 13 years. So
Yeah.
it was a long arc. I think we were an active band for what, like 93 to 2015. I don't know how many years that is.
Did you get to enjoy I mean, I'm sure you did, but did you get to enjoy anything from that first act with the presidents in the 90s when you're on Letterman and Jay Leno and all of that stuff? Were you able to take that in and enjoy any of it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I have really fond memories of those experiences. Yeah. Yeah, being on the Tonight Show with Chris Farley was amazing. I met Rodney Dangerfield at one of those things. Uh, Playing Paul Schaefer in the band on Letterman was fantastic. You know, wondering if I'd ever get to be on that. Of course, Johnny Carson wasn't there, but Um, so yeah, those were thrilling. Those were super fun.
I was listening to an interview you did a few months ago talking about that. I think it was Jay Leno when you guys jumped Farley right
Yeah,
as the show was ending, and it didn't actually make cut. But what was that whole scenario like? Who actually told you to jump on Farley, and did he
that
actually
was
take a liking to it?
yeah, that was Dave Dieter's idea. We were sitting there, we'd played our song I don't think. And Dave, right as the commercial break was happening before this, outro thing that was going to happen, and Dave leaned over to Jason and I and said, "When Jay Leno says good night, let's pig pile on Chris Farley." And we're like, "Okay." And Chris Farley is this, like, he was amazing. He's just like
Right.
giant bundle of energy. He had put on an amazing. He had done some stand up, and he was all like hot and sweaty and weird, and he had this leopard print jacket on. And so anyway, Jay says goodnight, and we jumped on Chris Farley, and you could see this like surprise in his eyes, like what are you doing? And then you could see his face shift to like, all right, here we go. And he planted his feet and just started like twisting his body, and were flying off of him. 90210 was a show back
Yeah.
in the 90s. Picked her up and ran away with her, like, saving her from the melee. Yeah, it was pretty fun. And then afterwards, Chris Farley and Jason and Dave and I all had a good laugh about it, and kind of I got a great picture with him,
Yeah.
and he was super glad we did it. And the producers of the show were like, "Well, you broke a table and wrecked a coffee cup, but we have a really good piece of video for our holiday gag reel for the holiday party." So thank you.
Wow.
But I've never been able to find it online, so it'd be fun to see.
That's a funny story, man. And the
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to ask you, I don't want to take too much of your time, but right now, you mentioned that you're getting pretty close to hanging it up. You want to kind of pursue other things. Do you enjoy performing for children more than you do for kind of raucous crowds in front of 7,000 people per se?
I really do, because they are so weird. They're like the happiest drunk people in the whole world. It's very punk rock. It's very like reminiscent. I mean, it's more punk rock than a punk rock show. There's more artifice and agreement about how things are going to go between a band and the audience at a punk rock show than at a Casper Babypants show. They will walk up to me and say the weirdest things, or interrupt songs, or just behave strangely, dance weird. They just are so free and so random and funny. Because I play for 0 to 6 year olds, so that's the bracket where they're really freaky. And then after six, they get a little more cool. I'm not interested in the cool kids. I want the weirdos. And so yeah, it's I like it better because it's not as loud. It's more sustainable. It's something I can do at 10:30 a.m. on a weekday, and then have the rest of the day to myself and sleep in my own bed. And the rock and roll thing is just terrible on the nervous system. It just burned me out
Yeah.
hardcore. I'm still recovering from it. I feel like. Uh, but yeah, I love playing for little kids. They are the greatest punk rockers in the world.
Wow. I mean, that's awesome, man. And thanks so much for taking time out of your day. I hope I didn't take too much of your time doing
All
this.
good.
And enjoy your day. It looks great. You got an awesome setup, dude. Like it's an awesome setup you got there. And I hope you're just staying safe during this quarantine period.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for asking me. It's fun to see people's faces.
Oh, I know. This is the only
I
way you
feel
can
like
communicate. It's nuts.
I feel like I'm stuck in like a loop of isolation. It's a weird experience, but it's a unique experience. So I'm trying to savor it too, because it'll be over someday.
Hopefully sooner rather than later, man.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, if you got what you need, thanks a lot.
Sweet. Thanks so much, man. I'll let you know when everything's put together too. I'd love for you
Okay,
to see it.
sounds good. Thanks, Jack.